Hello everyone and welcome back to this series. So in the previous two videos, we saw how to define our object and how to set the prototype. The link to those two videos is down in the description. And I would recommend going through that so that this video is a bit more clear. In the last section, we had left a code base with these two lines, which were not really what we wanted, but it did do the prototypical inheritance, right? The problem with this approach of defining the proto underscore underscore proto manually is twofold. First, it's a non-legit code because as per the convention of JavaScript, you should never touch the underscore variable of any class or any constructor function because these are private. These are supposed to be private variables. The second problem in our code base is that for every time we have to define a new object of capitals, so like Brussels and Washington, so on and so forth, I have to manually set the prototype. It's not really a production ready code. Ideally what I would like to do is to just copy this functionality, just copy these variables, sorry, and put them during the instantiation process itself, right? And the way to do that, one of the ways to do that is with the help of a call JavaScript function. What is call? It simply is a function in JavaScript which operates on another JavaScript functions in a way that you can change the application context within it. Now, I know it's a bit of a mouthful. Let me explain it with an example. Let's say we have an application and we have a car and a bike constructor functions in it. The car constructor function has a property called number of tires, and so has the bike. The numbers are different, of course, 4 and 2. The car has a function called print tires, which does nothing but just types number of tires and then the complete number. And it uses the this keyword to refer to the property type. So if I say car.print types, it should be 4. Now, if I had to do the same thing for bike, I would be replicating my print tires again, right? Now you might say, oh, why not, hey Aki, why not just put that in a base class? We could, but then we would be writing procedural code. Remember, JavaScript is heavily influenced by function programming, and that's where the call keyword, the call function shines. Personally, if you ask me now that I understand a bit of it, I like the functional aspect more, and I'm very sure that once you get it, you would also fall in love with it. So what I can do actually for the bike is to say, hey, car.printType.call.bike is 2. Very difficult to understand, right? But think about the functions in JavaScript as some kind of a balloons. That's how I understood it. So a function is not tied to one type, but it's actually a balloon. So I can pick that balloon and give it to anyone and have it executed. And that's the magic call is doing. So what it does when I say car.printType.call, I'm telling JavaScript invoke the call function on the printType function of car, right? And then replace the this within the function, which was this thing, with my bike. So the object's context, the application context of the function is not car anymore, but bike. I know it's a bit confusing. Let's see it with the help of a code. Let's have a look at our code base to see this functionality in action. So if I go to my constructor function over here, let's say after Belgium, I could define a new constructor function called province. It's a new function like this. Let's not take any input values, and this I can say this dot vaccinated is 100 and this dot population is also 100. The idea here is to call the percentage property, the function of the place constructor function, in a way that I don't have to define it here, and also not to change the prototype of province, right? So what I could do now is to say const province object is new pro. Oopsie, where is my IntelliSense when I need it? Like this. Now look at this one. I can say Brussels. Sorry, it's Belgium dot percentage dot call province object. So what I'm saying is, hey JavaScript, go ahead and pick up the percentage function of Belgium object and execute in a way that this keyword within that function is actually the province object, completely different object than Belgium or place. And I could do that in JavaScript slash any functional programming language, because remember, functions are variables. Functions can be passed around, but functions can be manipulated in any way you want, just like an ordinary variable. So if I do a console.log and then I print this thing, I should see 100. Let's do it. It compiled. If I go, oh, sorry, I have to remove the new over here. I missed it. So if I save it now, let's refresh it. That works good. And we have the 100% over here, right? So that's the magic of the call function. Now, what we can do is to create a new file in our code base, which I have already done, called capitals.call, and copy paste the exact code like we had in capitals.proto. But since we are not defining the prototype here and we are not defining the main object, what we could do is to say pick up the place object and call it, right? And call it with this keyword, and then I specify my rest of the properties like this. So what will happen is that whenever I instantiate a capitals object, JavaScript will call the place constructor function, which was this guy, and replace the this with the variable of capital. So in my case, one's for Brussels, Washington, and New Delhi. And that's how I would get my function for percentage, as well as the rest of the parameters like name, doses given, and so on and so forth. But before I do that, I also need to go to my app.js. And rather than taking the capitals from Proto, which was the old, save it. Voila. Is it working? Yes, as you can see, everything is hunky-dory. Let's have a look at the capital object with our new way. So this capital is actually being logged from this function here. It's this guy, right? We make a place call and so on and so forth. Nothing major. We have all the properties which we wanted. So doses given, name, percentage, and population is all coming from the place, and test center is defined on the capital itself. And then we have proto, the constructor function, and the object's prototype. The prototype property of the object is assigned to proto of my capital. We already discussed that in our previous video. So pretty nice. We could just use the call function. However, there is a problem. The problem is, remember in our last series, we discussed that it's not a good idea to have your functions directly part of the object. They should be part of your proto object, right? So that the function definitions are not repeated every time. Please have a look at the previous video and you will understand what I'm saying. So what I would like to do is to remove it from there and put it under proto. And the way to do that is first to change our place constructor function. Remember in the last video, we saw that anything you define within the constructor function is replicated for each of the instance variable. and that's not what we want. So to handle that, what we need to do is to say place dot prototype dot percentage should be equal to this function. So now every instant like Belgium, USA, and India, or any other object, in our case, the capitals, will have only one value. Let's save it. Is it compiling? Yes. Now, let's see if it works. If I go here, oops, you see, I get an error. And the error is that Brussels dot percentage is not a function. Interesting. Let me clean it. If I refresh it, I still am logging my Belgium object. If I look here, the percentage is gone. It's not even under proto. I do have a constructor function. Now, this constructor function is nothing but, in our case, since it is a capital object, it's this guy, right, which in turn calls the place, but there is no percentage function available anywhere, right? And the reason is, it might sound very confusing, but the reason is that it's very simple, honestly. The reason is that our proto does not have that percentage because we are not setting the prototype of capitals anywhere. So the JavaScript, only since we are not setting the prototype anywhere over here, JavaScript associates the object prototype to it, like it we can see over here, which is proto is same as object. Here you see, an object JavaScript function, the object constructor of JavaScript has no idea what percentage is. Note that the percentage is present in the places prototype object. So what we need to do is to say, hey, any object which instantiates from capitals, which is we set the prototype, again have a look at the previous series, should be same like object.create and set it to place.prototype, right? So this way place.prototype, if you look in our case, is actually having a property called percentage. Think of it as an object, think of it as a balloon again. JavaScript, when it is doing object.create, it will pick up all the properties, all the variables defined on the prototype and assign it to the prototype of the capitals, right? So what it would do after we do Brussels is new capital is to do, and that's done by JavaScript behind the scenes. It will say Brussels dot underscore underscore proto underscore underscore is actually capitals dot prototype. That's the magic that JavaScript will do, and that's how we will have a percentage object itself. So to make it to, for the sake of this part of the tutorial, I will not change my capitals.call. Let's create a new file which I've already done. It's on GitHub also. You can copy paste capitals.object. We start from the base place.call, nothing fancy here, and then we say capitals.prototype is same as object dot create and places dot prototype, right? If I save it, does it save correctly? Oh yes. Before I make this change, I need to associate the capital object file in app.js so that it does not use the old way. It uses my new file, which is over here, should be object. Let's save it. It seems to have compiled properly. Oh, now it works again. Now refresh our code base. If I open it, the percentage property has moved, and look what has happened to my proto. Now it's pointing to place, which is cool. And then I have the percentage property over there, right? So this is how you would do inheritance in JavaScript world. Now there are classes also. I know it's a bit more complicated. Classes streamline it, but I think it's very necessary that we know what is happening behind the scene in JavaScript before we do that. The final thing I would like to show over here, though it doesn't throw an error, is our constructor function. The constructor function is the function which is used to create those objects. And in our case, it is being used, the object which is the constructor function which is being used is of the place, which is not, it works, but it's not good. What I would like to see is that the constructor function which is being used is actually the capital object, because for me it is the capital. Any user will see capitals, right? He will not see that I'm setting capitals dot prototype, because that's behind the scenes. To handle that, what I can do is to say capitals dot cut it from here and start it once I get the value. I don't know what I need to put over there. Is to say capitals dot prototype dot constructor is actually capitals. So what I'm saying is, hey JavaScript, set the prototype to place, but use this capital constructor whenever you are creating it. So if I save it now and I have a look at it, that's my capital object. I should be seeing my constructor function, which is capitals and not something else. You see, it has changed. Previously it was the place, now it is of constructor function. Cool. So that's how you inherit classical inheritance in JavaScript. In the next video, we will see how to streamline this with the help of classes. Again, all the code for this is available in my GitHub repo, part 3. Have a look at it and feel free to play around it and leave comments. And if you have not already done it, please hit subscribe and like the video, share it. It will mean so much to me and it will motivate me to keep on doing more videos like this.